Hey, if you're new to my channel, my name's Nellie Monroe and I'm sure you have clicked on this video because you are interested in the StoryGrid Scene Writers Workshop. And if you're anything like me, you've been googling around trying to figure out if you can find any reviews from people who have done it, and there's not much information out there. That's certainly what I found back when I was looking into doing the workshop. I did find one YouTube video, but it was from someone who hadn't actually done the course. They were just comparing the information that they could find online about it. I just wanted to make this little video for anyone else who is out there and thinking about doing the course. I have now completed it. So today is day one of it. It is now a week later from the last time that we spoke. It is another week later. It is, I don't even know what week it is now. Week 5's class. It is now week 6. I'll give you a little rundown of what was all included in it first. With the 6-week scene writing workshop, the first thing that happens is you get an email through from one of the team at StoryGrid, and it has a little video in it that kind of shows you around their platform and how to use it and where to find everything basically. Following that, there is a sort of housekeeping call with Tim Grahl. Now, he does not actually do any of the training in the workshop. We only see him at the start and at the end for the initial introductory call and then the final call at the end. This course, one of the main things that makes it interesting is that it's not just like some course that you do on your own. You are interacting with StoryGrid editors as part of it. So that's where the value really comes in. So for 6 weeks, we do a weekly phone call. The phone call is run by 2 StoryGrid editors, and one of them will man the chat. The other person is doing a presentation with some PowerPoints. And together in small groups, I think there was about 15 writers in our cohort. We all were given a scene to read before the class call, and then on the call we go through it and try to pick out the different parts of the structure according to StoryGrid. So like the 5 pillars of story, that kind of thing. There's a chance to talk and interact with StoryGrid editors there. They then would go on to pick one of the students' scenes from that week, and we would break that down as well by all of its core components. So that was nice. It was nice to be able to see what the other students were up to. In between those weekly calls, you get daily, Monday to Friday, you get daily writing exercises. As well as the daily exercises, you also are given access to a Slack channel that has the other people from your cohort in it. For us, there was 2 separate cohorts with the calls were at different times, just so you could pick which one was easier for you to attend. The scenes that we were given to read for the live sessions, they would get posted in there. Otherwise, it was kind of quiet. I know that we could engage with the other writers, but it was kind of like crickets in our one. There wasn't a lot being said. I guess that will vary depending on who you're partnered up with and which cohort you're in. At least it was another place. If you had any issues or technical troubles, you could shoot them a message and get help with that. And then there's also a weekly homework exercise. So on week 1, we were told we needed to write a scene, no more than 800 words. And that scene would get sent off to a StoryGrid editor. We keep the same editor for the full course. They film a little video telling you your feedback, and they also have it typed out. So I think that's where the real value point of the course was. Everything else is nice to haves, and you know, they've tried to add as much value in places where they can, but the real value is having a StoryGrid editor feedback on your scenes week after week and trying to really help you figure out how to improve your writing. So today is day 1 of the actual workshop. Yesterday there was an introductory call. It was kind of cool. I got to speak to Tim Grahl on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever the hell it was. So I've had the first proper workshop call. The scene that we had to read for this session, we had to pick out like who the protagonist was, who the antagonist was, what the inciting incident was, the crisis point, all of that kind of stuff. So basically just kind of learning the basics, how they want us to structure scenes. And then we spoke briefly about the homework. So We have until Sunday, it's now Thursday, to submit the homework, which is to be less than 800 words. They just want one scene with a clearly defined protagonist and antagonist, and we need to hit all of like the 5 sort of beats of the scene. I've had my very first batch of feedback through the StoryGrid scene writing workshop. So let's have a look. First of all, I'll bring this up on the screen for you. You can see we have access to watch the previous recordings of the calls that we participated in, and there are daily exercises, 3 that required a description, 1 that required Valencin, a sentence, 1 that required us to think of some creative symbols of loneliness, 1 that asked us to analyse a passage for objects of desire and protagonist and antagonist, that kind of thing. I wanted to jump in and say that there was some delays in feedback on the daily tasks. On one of the calls, the editors running the calls had said, we won't do feedback immediately, we'll kind of leave it till later on in that day just to give people a chance to answer. One of the daily exercises, it took 5 days before there was a response there, and other daily feedback exercises that came after it had already had feedback. So there was some kind of confusion there. The daily exercises themselves were actually pretty fun. They didn't usually take too long, and it was nice to do these short little writing exercises that gets your brain going, because I don't normally make time for doing that kind of thing. So that was a nice change of pace. This first one, we were to write a 1-sentence description of this boy, and the focus on that was to go into enough detail so we can tell what's important and how the author feels about the character. One thing I will say that might put some people off, other people might not care, is that they do use AI in StoryGrid. A lot of the PowerPoint presentations and the daily writing exercises, they would have images that were clearly AI generated. I'm not going to get into the whole debate about AI, but I'm just letting you guys know that. They also have like a writer's tool that is AI, I believe. It's kind of like a little assistant thing in their platform. I'm not entirely sure what its purpose was. I asked it how I could change the avatar, like the icon on the platform, because some people had different pictures and things, and it was just like, sorry, I can only help you with writing. So I didn't find it particularly useful, and I wasn't going to use it to help me with writing. So there is just the information, do with it what you will, but that's just the facts. That's something that they use. There's some StoryGrid YouTube videos there, which anyone can watch for free. They're obviously relevant to this task that they've gave us, so they've put them there just for some additional resources, which is good. Your daily exercises, you're uploading in front of the rest of your cohort so everyone can see what everyone else has written. The main draw of this workshop was not the daily exercises, they were just something that was kind of there. For me, it was the weekly homework, where last week we were told to craft a scene no more than 800 words. In that 800 words, we had to have 2 characters. One had to be our antagonist, one had to be our protagonist. We had to have desires for each of them, a consistent escalation after the inciting incident, and like a kind of crisis, and our protagonist had to make a decision. So I did that, handed that in on, I believe it was Saturday evening. We had until Sunday evening to put that in, and I got my feedback, I think it was like 1 o'clock this morning. The coaches have until the day of your next call to give you your feedback. So that was delivered. In blue here we have the written feedback from my coach, Dave. You can see his analysis, his observations, and the homework that he's given me to carry on from here for the following week. And everyone's homework for the following week will be slightly different depending on what they've written and what their coach or editor in this sense thinks that they need to do. I will say that where he has put the turning point in the crisis and the climax and resolution, I had thought were slightly further up, but it doesn't matter. The feedback is still relevant. Yes, so it was delivered in writing as well as with a little video here where he just spoke about what he thought of the scene, and that was nice because he gives some positive reinforcement on the story, as well as giving me the things that I can work on. And the way that it was delivered, the feedback, is definitely in a way that is constructive, and you know what you need to do to try and improve it. It's not like, I didn't feel this bit worked, like something ambiguous like that, like, okay, why? What do I need to do to make it work? He was very specific in his feedback and what he thought would improve it. And I do believe that in the StoryGrid website, I can't remember if it was on the website or if it was from one of the YouTube videos, but there is a downloadable where you can download the actual marking material that these editors use when they're doing this for people in the course. And I remember I downloaded it before and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God. It was terrifying because I didn't really understand what half of the things were. So obviously it's helping me now as I'm learning about different things in the StoryGrid methodology that can tie back to that marking grid and kind of understand what that kind of feedback looks like. And in a sense, I should be able to take that and apply it to my own larger work out with this course, whether or not I'm going to be able to look at it clearly. I mean, when you're too close to the writing, sometimes you can't really, see the wheat for the chaff. So who knows? Will I be a better writer at the end of this? That is still to be determined. Hey guys, it's interesting, not in a bad way. The course, I've had one round of feedback last week and was given instructions to improve on the scene that I wrote. So my editor's observations said that it was a relatable working scene, but there was too much setup and a lot of internality, and that the climax was kind of soft because it's told in a dementia patient's point of view, and the dementia patient just kind of like falls asleep at the end of it. He's like exhausted himself, and that to make a decision he had to be awake and like consciously make a decision rather than just sort of letting him fall asleep on it. So I was like, okay, how can I try and fix this? And he also said that the A-B stakes must have both consequences and rewards. So following from that feedback, I raised the stakes. I gave the nurse some stakes as well. Like, she was going to get in trouble if she didn't get a move on. Like, she had other patients to see. She had like this sort of time crunch. And the patient, I raised his stakes. Obviously he's demented, he doesn't really understand exactly what's going on, which makes this scene a little bit more difficult to write. But I had him think that he, had been out drinking and his wife was going to be mad at him for not coming home. You can understand how you might think you've been drinking, and that's maybe why your memory is a bit fuzzy of what's happened leading up to where you are now, that kind of thing. So his stakes were, he thought his wife was going to be mad, and then he tries a few different things to try and leave, and the nurse obviously blocks that, which is something that we're told to have a bit of back and forth in our scenes. And then the nurse, he recognises the nurse could overpower him, and she's kind of put the bed rails up. He can't escape easily, and she threatens him with like, look, if you don't calm down, I'm going to have to medicate you. So the conflict that I thought that I had for him was like, okay, if I get caught out of bed again, I'm going to get medicated with this crazy person in a hospital. Like, I shouldn't even be here. But if I don't risk it and leave, then my wife's going to be really mad at me for not coming home. So I thought that I had a good amount of conflict there, and a good amount of like weight between like, if he decided to stay there, right, rather than risk being sedated or leave. However, the feedback this week is that it's no longer a working scene because, let me see where he's written down. He said it's a fun situation now, but it's not a working scene, and it was working last week, so that's incredibly frustrating that I've added a lot of great new detail, but it doesn't work because Mary's kind of become the antagonist. Like, he's worried that Mary will be mad at him, so I've took some of that away from the nurse. They say the nurse doesn't have anything to do whether or not Mary's heart will be broken. And when he's deciding whether or not to lie to the nurse, it comes across that there's no reasons on the page not to lie to the nurse. I mean, I thought I'd made it clear that lying to her comes with the risk of being caught and therefore sedated, but maybe I didn't put that across fully enough. So it came across to the editor that it was like a foregone conclusion that he would choose to lie to the nurse. I undercut climatic choice by immediately reversing himself. So I have him lie to the nurse like, yep, okay, I'll stay, I'll settle down. She leaves and then he tries to escape again when the coast is clear, you know. But that was me having him awake now and having him make a conscious decision on what to do. So yeah, the editor wants me to have another crack at the scene, but we're going to talk in Slack about like a really sort of binary, what was it he said, a clear binary crisis point. We need to work that out before I go ahead and make more of a mess of it. I mean, he didn't say that, but oh man. I read it at the open mic night the other day. I did record it, so in the next vlog, I guess I'll show you guys some of that. And also, like, I don't know if did I tell you this last week or not, but like my little writing group, like they were crying at it and they thought it was great originally. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna chat a bit with the editor in Slack and try and get this scene to a point where we can be done with it. Like I don't want to continue to be stuck on this. I want to move on to something else. I feel like I kind of hemmed myself into a bit of a difficult one with going for the dementia patient point of view, which did make it fun originally, but now trying to raise the stakes and stuff is kind of difficult. Oh yeah, so in like last week's class, we got talking about objects of desire and how the object of desire on both sides has to be achievable. And the patient, I felt like as a dementia patient, like his object of desire was to leave and go home, but really that wasn't achievable because he's a dementia patient, he's in hospital, he's not getting to just decide to leave. Like legally he can't just make a decision. That's why I kind of decided, okay, well, I'll change up and maybe he does decide to leave. You know, at the end he sort of stumbles towards the door and he's like, okay, cool, now I just need to remember where I live. It's so difficult. I'm one of those people where if I don't get something right and if I don't get it perfect, then I feel I get really hard on myself. Which, you know, obviously I'm finding this challenging and that is a good thing. I do recognise that being challenged is a good thing. It's showing me that there is learning to be had here. There are things that obviously there's things that I don't know, I'm not saying that, but you know, when you're reading like a craft book, you know, the concepts are all written down and that's great. And like the concepts from this workshop, again, like, okay, sure, I get that, or you think you get it, but putting it into practice in your own writing is a very different thing. And like I say, in my mind, I had checked all of the boxes that I needed to check, but to the editor, it's not coming across that way. So definitely more challenging than I would have expected because I've not done this kind of thing before. I've not studied literature, I've not studied writing, and yeah, it's very interesting. I just hope that I can actually crack it and kind of get it to the point where what my brain thinks is right is actually right. Week whatever it is, one more week from the last week that we spoke. So I did try again with my dementia patient scene. It was the last time that we tried to make it work according to the StoryGrid methodology, and he did say that it was better than it had been, but it still wasn't quite right. He thinks that the antagonist kind of flipped later on, and I can see that. It went from the nurse in this scene trying to make the dementia patient take their tablets, and he's like, no, I don't want to, and then she gets frustrated with him and is like, look dude, you're in a freaking nursing home, like just take these, get over with. The last time you didn't take your tablets you were really sore and it was annoying as hell. You don't want that to happen. And that's when he's like, wait a minute, and his reality starts to shift and he's like, whoa, she could be lying, is she playing a trick on me? And he kind of goes through all these different thoughts, and then he is holding the medicine cup with the tablets, and he sees his hand is like an old man's hand, and that's when he's like, okay, you can't fake this. And him taking the tablets is kind of like him giving into that new reality and that realization that he's losing his autonomy and that his life isn't what he thought it was when he woke up, you know. It's all kind of internal rather than the nurse like really forcing it, although I thought that she was forcing it by telling him that, however. And then we didn't quite get the resolution because it ended it on he choked down the medicine as reality came crashing down around him, which I thought was a nice little mic drop moment. But he said that we don't see the climax, what the climax means to the antagonist, who was originally the nurse in that scene, so it didn't really resolve all fair. And I can see, you know, he's labelled like different tactics and progressive complications and stuff that have worked into it. There's definitely a lot more like action in this version and less internality, which is so weird because I feel like I don't do enough internality in my main project, but maybe I do, I don't know. For next week's homework, he's let me write something new, which I'm really glad about, the dementia. I mean, I was inspired on week 1 to write the scene from a dementia patient's point of view, and I didn't really realise how deep we'd be going into it and that I was going to have to rewrite it 3 separate times. So I'm kind of over it, honestly. It's getting annoying now, and I'm really glad to be able to write something fresh for the next half. So I've had 3 rounds of feedback on that, and for the next little scene I thought it would be fun to just write a fun little fantasy scene. He wanted it to be a chase scene, any setting I wanted. The antagonist wants to catch the protagonist and the protagonist doesn't want to be caught, and at least 75% of the words need to be action. Start with the antagonist forcing the protagonist to flee and build up from there. Every progressive complication needs to be the antagonist making it worse for the protagonist. And I think I've done that. Hey guys, a quick little update. It is about 40 minutes until class, so I wanted to give you a little rundown. Last week my homework was to do a chase scene, and I've just handed in my second version of the fantasy scene, chase scene. So we'll see how that goes and we'll see what he says. I tried to have more balance in the crisis. We'll see. I'll go over that once I've got a few different rounds of feedback on it. And yeah, it's about 30 minutes until I have to do the next workshop, so I'm going to head out. I just thought I would share a little bit of what's gone on with the feedback and what sort of feedback you could expect if you did a course like this. And we will catch up next week. There's one more workshop class this afternoon for the scene writing workshop through StoryGrid. So in that we will revise one more scene. There's no homework this week because it is the last week. And that means over the previous 5 weeks I have submitted scenes to be reviewed by a StoryGrid editor, and the theory is I should have improved my writing in that time, and if not, then there's a money back guarantee on the course. So please excuse me, I have a cold or something. My throat is a little bit hoarse. I'm sure you're probably all wondering, how much does it cost to do the StoryGrid 6-week scene writing workshop? The total cost is usually hidden if you go to any of the resources on the StoryGrid website. They do tend to keep that a secret until you have, filled out some sort of contact form where they can see if you're going to be a good fit. And it's normally beyond that gated point that you access the pricing. So I'm sure they will increase their price, and that's a totally normal thing to do in business. Don't be put off if the price that I tell you has changed in the future. If you're watching this at some point in the future, it probably will have gone up. But the price that I paid was $1,290 for a 6-week course with 6 live workshops and 5 rounds of feedback from a StoryGrid trained editor. So after today's final workshop, where everything is wrapped up, there will also be one more phone call with Tim Grawl, who, if you've watched any of the StoryGrid videos, you're probably familiar with him. I'm sure that that call is going to be mostly a sales call. Again, good business practice. I'm not hating on it. And the upsell from here is that StoryGrid offers a writer mentorship program. And it's quite similar. I feel like the scene writing workshop is kind of like a small taster. I asked my editor for some more information. He said that there's different levels you have to graduate when you go into the mentorship program. Level 1 is mastering scene writing far beyond the scene writers workshop. So there's a promise of more to come, you know. To graduate to level 2, which is short stories, you need to master the 7 core types of scenes. When you're ready, level 3 is developing a long form narrative path and writing a publication ready novella or novel. So what most of us are looking to do, right? There's nothing random about the mentorship. Your mentor assigns the next logical thing that you need to work on based on where you're at. So it's not like one size fits all. Everyone's going to experience it differently depending on their strengths and skill set. One thing that I think will put people off is that you can't work on your own story in the workshop. They don't want you doing that. I can completely understand that. They don't want you to be committed to the characters or anything like that. They want you to be able to chop and change things without thinking about a broader story. And then I asked them how long it takes on average for people to get to the point where they can move up, right? Like, how long are you going to be paying this $1,100 per month for? Which I'm sure all of us would like to know, because it's not a small amount of change, you know. I did ask Tim on one of the calls, I think it was the wrap-up call, how long it would take people to master the scene writing aspect. What he told me is, really, most people within a year to 18 months will get to the point where they've mastered all the different aspects of scene writing, because they have a few different things that you need to sort of break through and achieve before you move on to the short story level. That was nice to hear, because I was a little bit worried that I wasn't getting everything right on the 6-week course, but hearing that it takes a lot of people 12 months to 18 months, that made me feel a little bit better. And then he assured me that beyond that, once you've mastered the scene level, everything else comes really easily, because everything else is basically made up of multiple scenes. You know, a short story is a bunch of different scenes. A novel is entirely of scenes. So once you've mastered that, the other parts, the learning curve isn't so steep. So again, that was nice to hear. Back to what you're really here for. Do I think that my writing improved over the 5 weeks that I got feedback? The answer is it's so hard to tell. The first 3 rounds of feedback were on one story, and then the next 2 rounds of feedback were on a different story. And I think that is making it a little bit more difficult to compare the first scene to the last scene and see how things have improved or changed. He's definitely pointed out some flaws in my writing that, now that I'm aware of certain crutches, I can try and avoid them. You know, you can't fix what you don't notice, so that's definitely been helpful. I think what I'll do is I am going to put up the 5 scenes that I got feedback on. I'll pop them onto my website. I'll leave the link down below for you, and I'll let you just look. I'll show you the written feedback for each of those scenes. So you can see all the things that I got told not to do. I'll leave all that feedback there for you, and you can read the scenes and decide for yourself. I think that's probably the best way for you to figure out if you want to invest in a course like this, because one, you'll get to see, you know, the kind of feedback that you can get, like what to expect. If you're someone who wants things really sugar-coated, it might not be for you. Normally I'm totally fine with things being to the point, but I think around about week 2 or 3, when I was just getting frustrated on that one particular scene not ever working out, I started to really doubt myself. So I think you do need to have a tough skin, because, well, they're here to help you, not to make you feel good, you know. Would I do it again? Yes, I would definitely do it again. It's really interesting to get some expert feedback on your writing. I don't think any writer is ever not going to find that interesting. I definitely know what problems I need to work on. I think the only thing that's making me wonder if I'm not a better writer is because the scene that I chose to begin with, that we did 3 rounds of feedback on, I feel like the first time I was pretty close to having a working scene, but the more I tried to overthink it and implement the feedback, it felt like I was making it worse. Whether I was or not, I don't know, but there was definitely a lot more red lines. You'll see for yourself if you go to the website. So I felt like I was getting worse, and then at the end, Dave seemed to think that I had improved. So that was his overall feedback. He was like, I hope you can see how much you've improved. You've definitely improved from the first round to now. Am I going to go on and do the writer mentorship program? Not right now. I do think it is a possibility in the future. It's quite expensive, so obviously that's a big consideration. The main thing for me, I'm not sure how long that program has been running for, but the success stories that Tim shared didn't feel that compelling. And again, this might just be because the program's not been running for that long. I'm not sure. I think it's one of those things you have to try it yourself, and it is what you make of it. You know, you can spend as much money as you want on a whole bunch of different things, but if you don't put in any effort yourself to learn and to take on the feedback and to try and understand where you're going wrong, then your writing's not going to improve. You know, it's a resource, it's not a guarantee. If you found this helpful, please leave me a little like and a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. It will really help my channel. I'm aiming to at least get over 100 subscribers this year, which is a baby goal for a lot of people, I know. And I will be doing an upcoming course on SEO for writers, so stick around for that. But alright everyone, take care.